Welcome everyone to the Hire TA Tech Teardown webinar. This is the third of our series of these. If you haven't been to any of them yet, I'll give a quick intro as to what it's all about. Over the past few years, the TA technology landscape has grown massively. It's really, really hard for professionals to keep up to date with exactly what's going on and what advances are being made. I think, so as we just talked about there, Tom, over the next couple of years, things can get even more exciting. There's a lot of change still to come. So it is really important to be on top of it and ensure that your team are using the most relevant, the best fit tools out there for you. Rather than you having to go and do all the research yourself, though, Hire have decided to create this series. The idea being we go out and find the innovators in the current market. We bring them in, have a live demo session with them, a webinar that's an open Q&A without everyone having to go through a sales process individually when they inquire about a demo. As today's guest, we have Pinpoint, and we're chatting to the CEO of Pinpoint, Tom, to get a take on why TA teams should be considering Pinpoint as their ATS. And we're also joined by Kyle, who's a regional recruiter at Continental, who's an active user of Pinpoint and can give his point of view on the platform, give us some top tips on how to get the best out of Pinpoint as a user. I'll hand it over to you two briefly for some intros, if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah, perhaps I'll go first and then kind of get out of the way for Carl. So yeah, Tom, one of the founders and the CEO of Pinpoint, been in the space sort of 7 or 8 years. Before that in software. Pinpoint ATS, we compete with all the other folks that you'll see day in, day out in the ATS landscape. We'll talk a bit about how we differentiate later, but kind of high level numbers are about 70 people, kind of low tens millions of revenue, customers in about 50 countries, about 8 million candidates a month, over 750 customers. Again, we'll talk just some examples of that later. I'm going to run you through some of the high level features of the product and things we think help us differentiate. But the reason we're very fortunate to have Carl here is, I guess our perspective is you're going to want to hear the features from me, but the much more important bits, like how are they used, what are the impact they're having, what's the underlying user experience like, and Carl is kind of going to give you that directly from the source. And so Carl, would love you to just say hi and introduce yourself and maybe a little bit of background on Continental as well, if that's all right.
Yep. Thanks, Tom. So Continental, we're a food management company in the US, Great Lakes state. So we're kind of surrounding the Great Lakes. So there's 5 states: Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, Pennsylvania, and then a teeny bit of New York. Very diverse areas, which is really great. I've been at Continental for 3 years, 5-member recruiting team. I think it's been 500 and something people since I think you guys pulled the information, Pinpoint. It's like 563 people since December of 23. Ton of people, 1,200 people a year that we hire for. The great thing that I can think relates to a lot of you is that we're superly heavily matrixed overall. Different divisions, different brands in different states. Pinpoint will probably show you that a little bit later of what that looks like in the system. Great thing is too, we do have these mass hiring events throughout the year. So examples are like the draft that we did up in Detroit or the PGA Tour that comes through Michigan. And then we do have consistent throughout the year hiring. So like office staff or warehouse or drivers or food service or anything. So we pretty much cover it all. So hopefully that relates to you and you can see yourself using Pinpoint at some point in the future.
Awesome. Thanks very much for your intros. And I think as well, being able to have the conversation with you both should enable the viewers there to get a bit more insight into the product mindset of Pinpoint, the future vision, where you want to take it next, what are the pain points right now for a company like Continental, and how can Pinpoint actually help to work with those. As Hire members as well, we do have a discount code of 10% off your first contract with Pinpoint. We'll share that after the event in an email form. And as always, please feel free to add questions into the live chat or into the Q&A section of Zoom, and we'll endeavor to answer all the questions as we go. We've had a couple come in before, which we'll touch on shortly, but please feel free to participate. Get as much out of the session as you possibly can and be interactive. So yeah, I guess enough from me. We'll go into the product now. So Tom, if you want to give us a little bit of a maybe overview of Pinpoint to date, the journey so far, and then lead that into the presentation, that would be awesome.
Sure. Can we see my screen okay?
Perfect.
Yep. Great. Okay, cool. So yeah, first and foremost, don't panic. I'm not going to bring you a big old slide deck presentation. I'm going to actually run you through the product. I'm just going to use this to kind of set the scene. So yeah, as we said already, we're Pinpoint. We're an ATS, but we see ourselves as doing three things, right? We do attract, hire, and onboard. And I think the onboarding piece is an important distinction in many markets. I think we see that there's kind of four key tenets that make us quite different from others in the space, or at least allow you to kind of compare us through a slightly different lens. I think first and foremost, we really believe in this notion of what we call fast and flexible, right? I think one of the things Kyle alluded to is this kind of very complex organization that he plays an important part of. And I think a lot of our customers fit exactly that bill, right? They might be recruiting in the office, they might be recruiting in the field, they might be recruiting across lots of different jurisdictions with very different labor markets, they might be recruiting very different seniorities of folks. And we want to try and be a system that allows them to do all of that and get ramped quickly, but also sort of not outgrow. And so I think with us, we think you get this kind of speed and flexibility, and hopefully that will come through as we actually show you the product in a sec. I think we care about customer experience, and I think everybody will say this. I think how people deliver it is quite telling. To be honest, a lot of functionality and features and products and other things are quite subjective. And so I'm always quite reluctant to sort of stand on a podium and say, we have the best X or we have the best Y. But I feel very comfortable saying we have the best customer success function and the best customer support team. What that means is typically sub 1 minute response times to queries. It means dedicated customer success managers. It means a proper partnership. And again, we'll sort of talk to how that actually plays out in practice as we go. And important to note also that that doesn't appeal to everybody, right? If you're a 20-person startup on the West Coast, maybe you never want to speak to your ATS provider. That's awesome. And a few years ago, that would have been the experience I wanted as a customer or a prospect. We're not the ATS for you if that's the case, right? Like we want to work deeply with each of the customers that we have and make sure that we're delivering a sort of as bespoke an experience as we can from the sort of core SaaS product. We are built with all users in mind. I think we entered the market at a very interesting time, and we sort of saw this shift in the way people thought about recruitment, and it's become more and more of a team sport over the past 5 years, particularly. I think what that means in practice from a product perspective is we don't just focus on the recruiter. Clearly, the recruiter and the Kyle of the world is our core user, but we also think about what experience do we need to be offering the hiring manager? What experience do we need to be offering the candidate? What are we thinking about from a leadership perspective? And how do we make it really easy for us to take data in Pinpoint and send it out to those folks? And how do we make it easy to promote engagement across the business? Because if you're not getting engagement from your hiring managers and leadership, it makes it very difficult for your ATS to deliver real value. And I think this last piece is this idea of an open ecosystem, right? We are kind of open source geeky dudes, sort of front and foremost. We have an open API, we have over 100 integrations, we're constantly shipping new integrations, and we really think it's important that we don't ever hold your data hostage. We think there's a lot of folks in the space who have solutions that have a lot of lock-in and they won't play nicely with others in the field. I think we want to be the obvious choice as the sort of platform, and we want to play super nicely with everybody else in that pre-hire ecosystem. And we'll talk to that and demonstrate that in a sec. Example clients, as I said earlier, we have 750 clients. I think you can see a sort of small short list of those there. There's a lot of diversity across that. And again, we do work with really cool technology businesses and startups. That isn't our core market, and you'll see that in sort of the example reference clients we talk to. We tend to work with larger organizations with slightly more complex needs or slightly more volume required. And we kind of have found a sweet spot, and we enjoy playing in that arena. And I think like, if we talk about some of the feature differentiation, and again, I'm going to summarize this really quickly, and then I'm going to actually dive into the products and show you some examples of this. We care a lot about the career site. I think we speak to a lot of organizations that recruit at meaningful volume, and they often struggle to offer a candidate experience they're really proud of. I think we try and sort of take the reins of that problem as much as possible. We deliver a fully branded career site experience. And we bring a lot of best practice to that. As I said, we process sort of north of 8 million candidate experiences a month. We have a heck of a lot of data that underpins that, and we learn from that and then bake kind of best practice into the product, so you don't need to think about it. Examples of that are things like hiring manager profiles, things like multi-brand. We offer multilingual candidate experiences from sort of soup to nuts. And these things are really actually quite hard to get, and you'll often end up spending a lot of time and friction building a discrete career site and trying to integrate that in a kind of ham-fisted way. We take all the pain out of that. We care a great deal about talent pipelining, especially for the sort of talent profile that lots of our organizations are recruiting, right? We make it very easy to build that sort of silver medalist pool of folks. We make it very easy to recruit all the time rather than just in specific arenas, and we make it very easy to kind of automatically find and search through that pool, as well as to communicate with them very frequently. Again, I'll show you examples of this in a sec. I think referrals and internal jobs are super, super, super important to us. Again, we work with lots of organizations who really, really, really like to see referral hires or have a lot of internal recruitment activity. And we're seeing in today's market, talent mobility become more and more of a theme on sort of CPO and CHRO radars. We offer a lot of solutions there, and we'll talk to that in a sec. And then these last two areas like interview scheduling and scorecarding and interview kits. I think the idea of interview scheduling is sort of what it says on the tin, making it very simple to allow candidates to schedule time to meet with you. I think this, at face value, is a very easy problem to solve. In reality, when you work with complex organizations with complex interviewing, it can become a very difficult problem to solve. And we've got a lot of experience working with almost every variant of what that might look like. And so we'll talk to that. And interview kits and scorecards, I think, plays back to this idea that, and we were talking about this thematically before we started recording today. We see a lot of problem right now with recruiter bandwidth, right? We've seen a significant uptick in applicant volume, but not necessarily an uptick in applicant quality, bluntly. And I think sometimes organizations are giving us feedback that they're finding it hard to differentiate or sort of separate the wheat from the chaff. They're finding it hard to give hiring managers the tools they need to properly assess candidates. And I think, again, it's just worth reiterating that hiring manager doesn't necessarily mean a white collar like sort of person sat at a computer with all the tools and experience. It might mean a retail professional sat on a tablet at a retail desk in a shop store, sort of very quickly flicking through candidates between busy periods, right? And we have to make sure we're making that experience as easy to engage with and assess as possible. And so there's a lot there. What I'm going to do is stop sort of talking and hopefully start showing. And so what I'll do is I'll run us through some examples. I'm going to kind of pause at the end of each of these and let Carl kind of share some of his perspective on what's working for him, what he's seeing in the market, both with Pinpoint and sort of more broadly. And so, yeah, if we dive right in, I think if we start on career sites, this is the kind of continental career site delivered through Pinpoint. I think there's a whole bunch of stuff here that we could sort of highlight, and I'll let Kyle talk to the continental site specifically in a second. I think kind of from a functionality perspective, that I wanted to showcase is just like, there's a lot of diversity in perspective here. So here are other example career sites delivered through Pinpoint. Here's FIFA's and here's our own. These are incredibly brandable, and you can kind of do what you like with these. We also have an API to allow you to integrate things with them. But if I was to jump into a career site, like a job, this job role is completely customizable in terms of appearance, in terms of the content, in terms of how things are laid out. But there's also these things that we integrate into this process that we see a lot of value in from a kind of candidate conversion perspective. So the first one is this idea of a hiring process. And what you can do is jump in here and kind of, it basically summarizes based on the hiring workflow assigned to the job, what the candidate can expect after they've submitted their application, and kind of lays that out in plain English to kind of give them that information preemptively. And so this has been a really useful tool for that. And then I think this second piece is what we call the hiring manager profile. So when you click on a role, you can click in and see that this is Harry in our CS team, and he's the person you'd work for if you join the team in this role. And you can kind of just learn about Harry and get to know that. I think one of the pieces of feedback we get really frequently from candidates is this drive for authenticity, and they kind of just want to get under the hood of the business at the beginning of the process. And so make it very easy for you to understand who you're going to work with, what other jobs that individual has available, and so on. And then the other bit, just to kind of draw attention to, is this idea of being able to register your interest and enter the talent pipeline right from the careers site, right? So again, we'll often work with organizations that have anywhere from tens to thousands of live roles at any one time. But often candidates don't see a role in that list that's particularly compelling to them right now and today. And so we make it very easy for them to fit in a high-level application form to hit the talent pipeline, giving you minimal information. And what they'll then do is enter your talent pipeline, and you can kind of manage them, assign them to roles, have some auto discovery and some automation and other things there. And we found that to be extremely, extremely useful. And then the last thing to say on career sites more broadly before I hand over to Carl for some commentary is just that everything you see from a candidate's perspective, be it the form they use to apply, the content that they read and engage with, the video they watch, etc., all of that is multilingual by default. And we support about 22 different languages globally right now. So if you're an organization recruiting in lots of territories, especially in today's market, being able to offer a candidate an experience in their native language is just of paramount importance. And we make it very easy for you to do that right out the box. And so I've talked for a few minutes. Kyle, do you want to jump in and just give us some feedback on what you're seeing with Continental?
Yep, for sure. So obviously right now in the market, we're seeing every candidate at different levels really care about culture and employer branding. Obviously that's attracting better quality candidates. So being able to have these videos that show, you know, what actually they're possibly doing or the people they're working with is really great to see. I mean, especially Continental, who's so diverse. I mean, you see in the video as it's playing there, like the different things that we do and the possibilities there are, which is really nice. Other part of it is that the transparency. You know, you always hear online, people are like, hey, if it's more than 3 interviews, I'm not doing it. Well, this obviously very much shows you what the amount of interviews that you be doing in the process or what the expectation of those is, which I think is really important. I mean, self-eliminates a lot of people, which is really nice. The other part of it is the hiring manager actual like review. I mean, everyone knows that a hiring manager makes or breaks the recruitment process or the job experience once they're in the role fully. So I think that's super important just to show, I mean, they can see what they look like. They can see if they have 100 openings and why is that? You know, they can tailor their questions to you or to the hiring manager during an in-person interview to reflect what they've seen on your website. I mean, I've had multiple people respond on this saying like, hey, I saw the video, I watched it, really like this part of your guys' company or, you know, whatever it is, which is really nice to see. I did see there was a question that popped up.
Yeah.
How easy did they integrate with Glassdoor? Was the question.
Yeah, so Bryce, we do. So there's you can integrate a widget into your career site with like a sort of drag and drop career site builder that will connect to your Glassdoor and show Glassdoor reviews or Glassdoor scores and other things like that. I probably have an example of that here. Yeah, so there's like a Glassdoor review here, and this will flick through, and this links directly to our Glassdoor profile and stuff like that. So yeah, absolutely, we can do that, and we work with all sorts of other social platforms as well to kind of integrate that content.
I was actually going to ask a question as well. Because there's quite often that people make mistakes in career site when they're building out the whole thing, and there'll be a typo here or there. How easy is it for you, Kyle, as a recruiter, to just jump in and change something, or do you need the support of engineers to do that?
So Pinpoint does a lot of it. However, they're very open to changes, especially when we're implementing. Our marketing team is very particular on what things look like.
Yeah.
So there was a ton of changes, and Pinpoint was super open with it, of what they were able to do, what they weren't able to do. And I mean, we got what we wanted. So there wasn't too much that they could do.
I think, yeah, just to reiterate on that, I think I guess our perspective on it through the implementation phase is very much the last thing a recruiter or anybody associated with the recruitment wants to be thinking about during their ATS migration is like the style of the typography on the career site. And so like we literally have a team in our engineering function called the enablement team, and their entire job is to build career sites for people. We do the styling, we do the content. Like when I say we do the content, we take content provided to us, we make it sort of all sit and fit within brand guidelines, almost like a sort of agency format, right? It's all included in the cost. And then on an ongoing basis, we're extremely responsive to requests to make changes, but we can also enable clients to go in and edit it themselves. And there's a content management system that sits behind the platform that clients can use to make those amends. I would say that most people don't do that. And the reason that they don't do that is because they find it's easier to just ask our support team to do it for them and it gets done. Yeah. And so, yeah, what we're not trying to do is sort of impede the ability for a team to go and make those changes themselves, but they often just find it's easier to escalate to us and it gets done in minutes often.
Amazing.
Cool. I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to move on, and I'm going to try and get through all of this in sort of the next 5 or 10 minutes, leaving us plenty of time to kind of go through the questions, take questions from the audience and stuff like that. So this is the product. This is what you'd see when you log in. For the avoidance of doubt, we just had a look at Continental's career site and a few other examples. This account is just a demo account full of nonsense data. We're not showing anybody's real information for obvious reasons. This dashboard is super customizable. And again, we're not going to have time to go through the whole product today, but just kind of showcasing a few key areas. If we jump into the talent pipeline. Now, in Pinpoint, we kind of make this distinction between applications for a role and folks in the talent pipeline who are interested in working for your organization but aren't assigned to a specific role. We've put a couple of hundred fake people in here. And one of the things to note with the talent pipeline is we make it really easy to build what we call talent pools out of those people, right? And so as candidates enter, what Pinpoint's doing is looking through the CV, parsing all of that data out. We have quite a sophisticated parsing engine, and we continually iterate on that, and pulling out kind of buckets of skills and experience and things like that, so that it's easy to search through these candidates, do Boolean and advanced searches, but also so it's easy to sort of automatically put them in talent pools based on things that we're identifying from their application. We have very advanced search. We have lots of filtration and other things like that. And then on the left, and you can see I've built out some examples here, but we can kind of cut the talent pipeline into lots and lots and lots of different talent pools. And you can even set permissions on those pools. So you can say certain members of the team can kind of only play and fish from within certain talent pools. And so we make it really easy for you to kind of go pick those people up and refine them down based on skills. Or in this example, here's people who've already been checked and could start immediately and things like that. And then if we jump into candidates, you can see an example. This is a bunch of fake data, obviously, but we can go and look at resumes. We can complete scorecards, and we'll come back and look at scorecards and how they work properly in a minute. Essentially, we can communicate with these folks. We can send them email sequences or even SMS sequences, that huge volume. And so the idea is not only do we want you to be building this talent pipeline to make it easier to recruit from within that in the future, but we want to make it really easy to kind of keep those silver medalist candidates warm and ready for the next opportunity that arises within the business. So there's a lot on talent pipeline. And I think that the last thing to say is, like, if I was to jump into any example role, so if I just jump into this one, for example, this is what a job looks like, and we can sort of see a hiring workflow and a number of stages. And it's important to identify that this hiring workflow is A, completely customizable, and B, can be different for every single role if needs be. But on the right-hand side, what we do is we embed the talent pipeline. Where there are candidates who are sort of determined to be very appropriate for the role, we will highlight and surface them automatically. In this example, because the candidates are all fake, that hasn't happened. But what we've done is embedded all of the talent pipeline, and from within the interface, you can go drill down into talent pools, drill down into specific skills or experiences and other things. And from within that, invite those candidates into the pool for that specific requisition. And so we try not to keep these as two very distinct, like siloed experiences. We want to make it easy for you to kind of fish from the catch you've already got, right? And so, yeah, again, pausing there, Carl, any feedback or commentary on how talent pipeline's working for you guys?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, for us personally, I think we're in rural areas or a city. So those rural areas that maybe there's not 100 people, for one position. This allows us to have that talent community that we can lean on, and hopefully have our time to fill reduce because of that. I think it's one of the main things. I mean, even collaboration, at Constant, the way where our team is structured is very different than probably some organizations. But I mean, if they're working on totally separate, requisitions, and all of a sudden, this is a better fit for someone else, you can push that. I mean, Tom, you'll probably show it later, but that can be pushed through the talent pipeline if something's not open at the time, or something along those lines. I mean, it makes it easy too for silver medalist candidates just to stay in contact with them. It's so hard. Everyone, I know you mentioned bandwidth earlier, everyone's so focused on filling these positions, what's currently in front of you. And it kind of allows you to look ahead and maintain those relationships, so you can hopefully lean back on them at some point in the future.
Makes sense. And I think, yeah, I just wanted to re-emphasize the piece that Carl talked about there around like the multi-brand thing. I think one of the concepts we didn't talk about too much in the careers site is this idea of this multi-brand organization. And I think that's a very common thing amongst our organization, right? It might be a Topco, or for example, we work with a lot of hospitality organizations that have lots of different restaurants or lots of different cruise line properties or lots of different hotel brands, and they want to offer a very distinct experience depending on the brand you're applying for. If you apply for Princess Cruises versus Holland America Cruises, or et cetera, et cetera. And we allow you all within one Pinpoint account to operate a complete multi-brand experience that will route emails with the right branding and the right tone of voice, and the careers site and the candidate forms will all be very bespoke to that brand. But we do that without you losing the ability, like Carl just talked about, to sort of share candidate pools across those brands and across those organizational units. And to some people that might sound extremely uninteresting and boring, But for those for which this matters, that is a really hard problem to solve. And I think we're quite uniquely placed to really deliver an experience that makes sense there, right? And I think, yeah, we're just very comfortable with like where we stand out and who we deliver value for. Moving on then, so again, want to be respectful of time. I think let's talk a little bit about referrals and internal jobs and things like that. So right from within the platform, we have an entire referral management solution in place. So we can, if you have the right role and so on, you can jump in and see referrals. Obviously, this data is all fictional, but you can see who's been referred in to which roles, how much commission is due, how much has actually been paid, what the status of that referral is, where that's going, which jobs have referrals enabled. And it's very easy for you to go edit a job and change the referral incentive and bonus at any point. Whenever you create a referral job within Pinpoint, we can automatically email everybody relevant within your organization with a link to go understand that and go kind of flag that. And what then happens is, even if you're not a user of Pinpoint through and through, i.e. even if you don't come in and actively participate in recruitment management, or you're not a hiring manager, what you can do is you get given a very simplified version of Pinpoint, which offers you an employee dashboard. And this really functions to serve two things. A, it's an open job board for internal only roles. And so a lot of our organizations will have a policy, for example, where they will open a requisition, but only allow it to have internal applicants for a fixed period, perhaps 2 to 3 weeks, before then going back out to the market. And so this is where you can go and see that. And then we can also manage our referrals. I think just to quickly touch on open jobs, this is a very unbranded, simplistic version of an internal job board with fake data in it. We expose all of this data both through our API, but also through a simplified version of things like an RSS feed or little widgets. And so often the use case for this is our organizations will sort of implement like a widget like this into their SharePoint or into their internal intranet or into some equivalent thing. And it will automatically be kept up to date and everything. So it's very easy for you to distribute these internal opportunities out to the business where feasible. And then on the referral side, you get this referrals dashboard, and every individual employee gets a unique link. This is obviously a demo account. And this link is the link they can use to send out to their friends, to post on socials and other things like that, to kind of pull candidates into vacancies that your organization has. When you do that, and when individuals apply, you can also actually see who has applied using your referral link, and we sort of gamify that and show you where you're at in the sort of competitive landscape of the rest of the employees, and try and kind of make sure that everybody's getting sufficient incentivization to participate. And you can also see a list of roles that have referrals opportunities available, and you can get a short summary of that and the type of individual they're looking for and things like that. And so this gets a surprising amount of use, and not only are we expecting individuals to kind of come in and look at this stuff, but we make it very easy for you to push this information out into a Slack or into email and things like that to make sure that the whole business is aware of opportunities that you have on the referral side. And I've yet to meet an organization who doesn't think that the quality of hire from a referral is higher than any other source of like any other hiring source, right? And so we just want to make it easy to manage all of that right from within the platform. And again, Kyle, any feedback or input on referrals and how they're working for you guys?
Yeah, for sure. So for us, referrals is our second source of hire. Like you said, most important is referrals. It's nice that notifies staff internally that there is a referral bonus. You're able to customize it. I'm not sure if you said that. Super nice. You can do that when you post the job. The other piece of it is that you're actually in the job able to share the link to your social media directly. Perfect. Which is super nice. I mean, a lot of our, executive team likes to do that, is share that to their Facebook or whatever they use. And with that too, when someone is referred, it shows in their application who it was referred by, which is super nice. Just so you don't have to go searching, and it's always a pain to have to figure out who I need to pay this bonus out to. And then with that, it also moves the candidate into the job candidates and marks them or tags them as a referral. So you kind of have an idea like, hey, this person's a little bit different than everyone else.
Exactly. So yeah, you can see here, I mean, obviously, again, excuse the very fake data, but you can see here that this candidate, Aaron, has been automatically tagged as a referral. And then if we clicked into Aaron, we'd see who had referred Aaron in. And equally, if we were to go look at like job level insights for this organization, we can kind of get a breakdown of applicants by channel. And again, this would show you who came in through referral and how many candidates came in and what's the further stage that referral candidates are reaching. And like, we do quite a lot behind the scenes to make sure that you can really track the efficacy of all of these channels in great depth. And we'll talk to that at the end of the session if we've got time. Yeah, that's referrals. I think, again, conscious of time and moving swiftly on, I'll spend a bit less time on these examples. So interview management, obviously really, really, really important, right? We've got this example marketing manager role. We've got 3 distinct interview phases here, a phone screen, a multi-part interview, and a hiring manager interview. Just really reiterating that we can handle pretty much every type of interview that you might throw at us, from simple one-to-one interviews to video interviews to group assessment days on site and sort of everything in the middle of those things. We integrate with calendars, and we try and make it extremely easy for your organization to kind of auto-populate availability and offer candidates the ability to self-select. We are also aware that for many types of organizations, their users are not calendar users day to day. And so we make it very simple for you to create those interview slots manually or to assign time to candidates. I think in an idealistic situation, we've got these kind of 7 folks in this hiring manager interview stage. We can select them, we can invite them into interview, we can choose a different sort of interview type. We can either manually specify slots, or we can allow the candidate to pick a time. And if I remove these fake people just because my calendar is actually synced, we can sort of automatically do this driven by calendar availability. I can say, hey, I want to send out interview slots from the 1st of July until the 21st of July. We obviously handle multiple time zones and everything like that. So if you're recruiting remotely, it will adjust the time zone automatically depending on the candidate's location. And then essentially they'll get an email with an invitation to an online platform that works on their phone or on their web browser. And they can come in and it'll say, you know, hi, Kyle, you've been selected to interview for this. You can use this to distribute information on an interview by interview basis. So if you want to do little details, here's a pack of stuff that you should know, or here's the questions you're going to get asked, or here's directions on how to park and validate your parking at the offer. We make it very easy to do the kind of bespoke things within this experience. And then the candidate kind of comes in, browses the availability and chooses a slot that works for them. And we kind of do all of the email calendar distribution and all of that kind of funky stuff and make it easy to reschedule and remanage. And so like, again, this stuff at face value looks very simplistic, but when you layer in all of the complexity of different interview scenarios and large teams and multi-parts, delivering a candidate experience that is really consistent is important. And just the last point to flag on this is, because this is a demo account, this is branded as Pinpoint. Clearly, if this was a customer's actual account, there would be no reference to Pinpoint anywhere. This would be fully branded end-to-end with your typography and colors and brand, etc. And so, yeah, conscious of time, but interview scheduling is just a really important thing to get right within the product. I think some people call it a separate product altogether. We think it's a feature. We think we do it well.
Yeah.
Kyle, any feedback? And oh, sorry, Ben, was that?
I have a quick question on that, because you mentioned earlier the multilingual candidate experience as well, and how you see job posts in different languages depending where you are. Is that the same with this, like the scheduling and the interviews? Could you have correspondence in like Spanish? But
Exactly, yeah. So what happens in practice, right? And again, this account is fake, so it doesn't have this set up. But what happens in practice is if you have a multilingual candidate experience, from the career site onwards, you choose your language. So as a candidate, I might choose to view this job in French or Chinese or whatever. When I apply, all of the form and every touch point with that candidate is in that language. When I apply using the Japanese language version of the form, for example, this candidate long here, he is going to have the language assigned to his name, right? And so like he will be Japanese in this context. When we then, for example, do a bulk invitation and I send 7 interview invites out, the ones who are in English will be in English. The Japanese candidate will have the email sent to them in Japanese. The experience will all be in their native language. The text message reminder they get will be in Japanese, etc. It's all just done automatically by the system because we know what language they use to apply in the first instance. And so, yeah, that's very, very, very easy to manage. Obviously, what that relies on is you having then an individual who can communicate with that candidate in Japanese. We don't do the actual interview for you, but like every touch point between that should all be in native language.
Awesome. And we've had another question as well, which is, could you give us a quick snapshot of the visibility a hiring manager would have of the progress of a rec, of the candidates in the pipeline, etc.?
So sorry, the question was, can you see what a hiring manager would see of a role?
Exactly. Yeah. What kind of visibility does a hiring manager have of the progress of rec?
Sure. Yeah. So it's a great question. I think we come back to this kind of flexibility piece, right? And what that means in this situation is the answer to that question will be very different depending on the organization in question. And so some organizations, so what we're looking at here is just a job, like a rec view. And you can see this is a marketing manager. We've got 5 requisitions or 5 headcount against this role. So we're hiring 5 of these individuals. This is the process, and this is how many candidates we have in each stage of that process. Now, some organizations want their hiring manager to have complete visibility of every element of this. That's obviously rare. Many organizations will restrict the hiring manager's perspective down just to specific stages. So for example, this stage, the 7 candidates in HM review, that's hiring manager review in this context, it would be very common for the hiring manager to just see the candidates in that stage of the process. So they would log in. When they see the job, they would only see 7 candidates. They would just see this marketing manager role. They won't even see the other stages. And these are the candidates they're being tasked with review. And clearly they can click into each of these candidates and go and make a choice and review them and scorecard them and so on. We also just give them this button. And what this button allows them to do is it will basically load in all of the candidates for the role. And then they can just flick through them without having to click off again. So they can see the candidate, they can go in and see their data, they can look at the resume if one has been uploaded and so on and so forth. And then just to touch on hiring manager flexibility a little bit, I think hiring managers obviously experience the platform in different ways and want different information. And so for our sort of standard user, we give them this very sort of tabulated view and they can navigate through that as they see fit. For a slightly more sophisticated end user, we have this view called split view. And what this does is basically puts all of the information about the candidate in one view. And it actually allows you as an individual to customize what you want to see. So my personal preference, for example, is I chuck the resume up at the top. And then on the right-hand side, I want my scorecard and my comments. And so now when I look at candidates, I can see the resume. I can go in and I can complete my scorecard. I can filter through this and leave my feedback. And then when I'm done with this candidate, I just click next and it will load the next candidate in with exactly the same view. And so it's really, really easy for you to kind of power through candidates at high volume and only see stuff that's relevant to you. Hopefully that makes sense. I think, yeah, it's a bit of a fluffy answer to the question, but the reality is just that you can give the hiring manager exactly the experience you want them to have and nothing more and nothing less, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anything to add to that, Carl, on interview management or on sort of maybe to talk to how you're configuring the hiring manager experience at Continental?
Yeah, so we're trying to give full transparency to managers. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, obviously, depending on the manager. But the nice thing is you're able to turn that off for certain managers, I guess is the best way to put it. So they're only able to see, if we like this manager because they are really on top of everything, they're not crazy when it comes to hiring managers and moving everything through. We let them have full access. If they lose that privilege is always the best way I put it. Then I'll remove them myself, which is super nice. On the scheduling piece, eliminates uninterested candidates from the recruitment process. If they say, hey, I'm not interested anymore, they don't do it instead of you trying to chase them down for an answer, which is nice. Continental has field managers that are all over the place or drive from client to client site. This system helps tremendously. They just block their regular calendar off in Outlook or whatever they use. And it transfers over to Pinpoint for candidates to select whatever time, which is nice. The calendar invite that they get is that simple version of kind of what Tom showed. It's all on one page. They literally can click a link that is in the calendar invite that takes them directly to the candidate profile, which is super nice to see too.
Cool.
Oh, reminders too. You do get text. You can set up text reminders for candidates based on scheduled interviews for phone screen or in person or Zoom or whatever.
Yeah, it's interesting. We talked about we talked about recruiter bandwidth. I think this theme we've seen a lot rise, especially over the past sort of 18 months, is absenteeism, or especially in high volume sectors, if you think about logistics, retail, hospitality, manufacturing, where the volume is often very high, there's a lot of ghosting at interview stages. And so having things like, can we go in at an interview set up and can we configure this so that we set SMS reminders, they get sent 2 days before, 1 day before, 4 hours before, 1 hour before, just to make sure that the candidate is there. It's all on the phone. They click a link, it's done. These little tiny kind of micro adjustments often compound and make a huge difference to the overall outcome. Just conscious of time, because I know we've got a bunch of questions to address. I think I'll forget reporting for now. We just talk on scorecarding. And so the last thing I think that we think is really important is as I briefly showed you when we looked at a candidate there, making it very easy to gather structured data on a candidate. And so this is an example of a scorecard or an interview kit. You can make this look and feel however you want. You can have as many questions and open text inputs and so on and so forth. The idea is that, and by the way, we will work with you to build these if you don't come into Pinpoint. You already using them. Like your customer success manager will ask you questions, understand what matters to your business, and help you kind of shape scorecards that make sense for you. The point of them is it makes it very easy for your interviewers to assess candidates on a sort of structured setup. And then the benefit of that, and we talked a lot about, again, some of the complexity of comparing candidates with one another earlier, is we then give you this scorecards view. And what this is going to do is show you all of the candidates where scorecards have been completed and show you how they've been scored and assessed. It will give them an overall score. And again, this isn't like a dodgy AI guesswork assumption of how good this candidate is. This is like us in interpreting your actual sort of qualitative data or quantitative data and showing you that in a way that makes sense. And so you can then do things like, well, Leonida seems like the strongest candidate here, but actually I'm just interested in the person who takes the most ownership. And in that instance, it's Charlie, and they have the strongest score there. And maybe I care about something else. And we're going to reorganize these candidates to show you what matters. We can also click in here to feedback, and it's going to break down the feedback left by each of the hiring managers against each of the candidates. So it's really easy to kind of power through. We can condense this, make it very easy to compare candidates side by side. And so if you've got large volumes of candidates, as you work through the process, just naturally, we make it really, really, really easy to focus on the ones who make sense. And then we can set up rules to automatically invite those other ones to the talent pipeline and reject them and so on. And so hopefully that's clear. I think, Carl, any quick commentary on scorecarding before we move to the questions?
No, it just creates, I think it creates consistency. I think it's the biggest thing across managers, which is nice to see. And then you can incorporate more of that employer branding, whether it's core values or whatever, you find important at your organization. But yeah.
Cool.
Awesome.
Great.
Great. So thanks very much for the demo there. I'll ask a few questions, but audience as well, feel free to chime in and ask any questions if you have any that you want to ask. The first one I have, I think DE&I is still massively important, particularly from a recruiter perspective. It's something that's at the top of our mind. Naturally, we're quite humane people in HR and talent. We like to be nice to people and do the right thing. Is there anything that Pinpoint does to support DEI to help build more diverse pipelines?
Sure. Yeah. So sharing my screen again. I'll stop sharing my screen as we go through the questions, but I'll kind of bring the product back up again if I feel like there's something that's worth digging into with the example data. So absolutely, we care a great deal about this stuff. We're really proud of the team we've built and the diverse nature of those folks, and we want to make it easy for others to do the same thing. I think if I touch on a few kind of core streams, right? So one is starting with the quality monitoring reporting. We make it really easy to gather this data at inception of the candidate's application, but also to ask for this stuff later in the process if you don't gather it up front or if you're self-sourcing or whatever. We make it really easy to kind of summarize this data, break it down by different locations, departments, types of roles, and other things. And also, if you're sourcing a lot, by individual recruiters, and identify like, are your recruiters actually giving you a diverse pool of sourced candidates? We can then take that to another level, and you can build out custom reports, and you can do things like show me diversity through stage progression. It's great that we have a diverse input, but how far are those candidates actually getting through the process, and what does that look like? And do we have goals, and how are we reporting against those? And then without getting too boring about it, again, this stuff seems easy at face value, but when you start recruiting multinationally, you find that different countries have different DEI requirements and regulations and reporting restrictions and upfront question requirements. You can set completely bespoke DEI policies per location. And so you can have different forms, different inputs, different customized outputs and reporting, and we just handle the whole thing for you. And so again, this is the sort of, we're touching a lot on where Pinpoint becomes the right choice for a client versus sort of everything looking like feature parity. The other thing I'd say is we care a lot about what we would call anonymized screening. And so right now, and people have likely seen some functionality like this before now, but we were the first to put this into an ATS several years ago. You can look at your candidates. You can see at the moment, these are obviously fake people, but real names. We can edit a job, and we can turn on anonymized screening. And what this will do, if I save this, obviously it's a bit of a moot point because we've actually seen the candidates now, but in reality, this would be locked down. we've now hidden all of the personal identifiable information about a candidate. And so we've used a combination of like colors and vegetables and things like that. We like hide everything from the CV. We like automatically redact the documentation, and you can also customize like what we redact and what we don't. So some organizations want to see education, some don't, etc. But the idea is that we'll then hide anything that's considered sensitive about an individual. And that stuff will only get revealed once that individual has scheduled a face-to-face interview with you. Because obviously at that point, you need to know that Ben's coming in at 2 on Tuesday and yada, yada, yada. But this has made a tremendous difference. And we work with a lot of organizations who really, really care about this stuff. And the insights we get about the different composition of folks making it to late stage is absolutely fascinating. And so, yeah, there's a lot baked into the product, not just to help you report on this, but also to kind of help you do it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. Thanks very much for sharing that. And you mentioned right at the very start that you're not just an ATS, but you also are involved in onboarding. I think that's an area where there's a lot of friction as a talent team hand over to a HR or people team. There's a pre-onboarding stage where candidates just sometimes get ignored for a month before they join. It'd be quite interesting to see what Pinpoint have done around that.
Sure. Yeah. And so I'll talk to that rather than showcase that just because of time. But yeah, look, onboarding we think is extremely important. I think if we step back a bit and we look at the market more broadly, I think like our as a business and mine as a sort of miserable leadership figure view of the world is there's a lot of fragmentation in the talent tech landscape, right? We've seen everybody go from like one human capital management suite, as it used to be called, to like 10 or 15 tools in the stack. I think a lot of those tools are features and not real businesses. And I think the frothy landscape has allowed that to exist and it won't continue. Our vision of the future of the HR tech landscape is this kind of distinct separate tools, the pre-hire platform and the post-hire platform. We are looking to become the pre-hire platform of choice. I think it's impossible to do that without offering a really solid end-to-end onboarding experience. And one of the biggest pieces of feedback that we get from clients a year or two into their Pinpoint experiences, I really wish that you offered an onboarding solution because we offer this great candidate experience and our recruiters love the whole process up to the point that we say yes to Ben and then it all falls off a cliff, right? And so what we have built and sort of, again, this fast and flexible approach is a very, very, very customizable and configurable yes to desk essentially experience of everything between offer acceptance and day one. I apologize, my webcam has frozen on a beautiful freeze frame there, but I'll carry on talking nevertheless. Yeah, and so what we have within the product now is something that allows you to really manage that experience from end to end, right? And that is really designed to do two things. I think first and foremost, relieve administrative burden on the onboarding team or the internal recruitment team, right? We talk about recruiter bandwidth. I think onboarding teams haven't had the credit they've been due for the volume of work they have to do with, especially very high volume, friction-based documentation gathering, data gathering, and so on, screening. And so we make it very easy for you to do all of that on a self-service basis. And then the second piece is just continuing that energy around the candidate experience and making sure candidates can self-serve and really get what they need whilst they're ramping up. And that might be telling them about the team they're going to join. It might be giving them information. It might be helping them request their uniforms and all the other sort of tertiary pieces. But we just want to make sure that that experience is as consistent for as long as possible, rather than it becoming this very ugly spreadsheet as soon as the offer's been accepted.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a question that's just come through from Bryce, which is typically where do you see the handoff on onboarding between TA and HR ops? And with Pinpoint being involved in the onboarding, does that mean that typically HR ops are onboarded onto the ATS and have access to the ATS as well?
Yeah, again, apologies for my flattering webcam. Again, without dodging the question, it's a really good question. The answer very much depends on the organization. And I think one of the things that we said right at the beginning is that we're not looking to hold anybody hostage. And so for some organizations, especially the very large ones, they may already have a very established onboarding process, either through a dedicated onboarding solution or as integrated into their HRIS. And I think if they feel comfortable with that, Pinpoint will do everything up to offer acceptance, and then we'll push that data automatically via an integration into the onboarding solution or into the HRIS, and you'll take it and run with it there. I think increasingly what we're seeing is people either don't have a dedicated onboarding solution or are unhappy with what they're getting from their HRIS. And so we are onboarding those HR ops folks into Pinpoint. They get a very discrete, sort of separate experience. It's a dedicated product rather than a feature of the ATS. And they'll go in there and they'll manage onboarding through and through in Pinpoint, and then push the fully onboarded individual into the HRIS and sort of go from there.
Excellent. I'm conscious of time. We've got a couple of minutes left. Just wondering if anyone has any more questions. If not, we'll go to a wrap up. So people feel free to ask questions now in the last minute or so. But yeah, I just want to make sure we have time to say thank you to you both for joining this. I think that was really, really insightful. I think some of the challenges that Continental are facing, Kyle, that you talked through, I think the way that Pinpoint are trying to solve those challenges as well is really fascinating. Particularly from my point of view, my background predominantly in like tech organizations and product organizations. So hearing the intricacies of what you have to deal with, and like, yeah, stuff that I would never really even consider, and then how technology is solving those challenges, I think that's a really awesome thing. So thank you both so much for your insight. As I mentioned at the start, there's a promo code that will be sent around by the hire team. They'll send that around ASAP after this event. I'm sure if you have more questions for Kyle and for Tom, feel free to connect with them on LinkedIn, over email, however best, and continue the conversation. And also please check out hirehq.com. It's our new hire content platform, where we're going to have a live, well, a recording of this, as well as a recording of the other TA Tech Teardown webinars that we've done. But I hope everyone found it useful. There's no more questions that I've been talking. So yeah, thank you very much, everyone, for joining.